She thought she had escaped her past. Then one familiar face walked through the door and proved how wrong she was. Jasmine Brooks balanced a silver tray of sparkling water glasses as she moved carefully through the crowded ballroom of the Moretti estate. Crystal chandeliers shimmered overhead, casting warm golden light across marble floors and designer gowns. Laughter floated through the air. Expensive watches flashed beneath tailored sleeves. It was another high-profile charity event hosted by Vincent Moretti, one of the most powerful men in Chicago. For everyone else in the room, the evening looked perfect. For Jasmine, it ended the moment she looked toward the entrance. Her smile vanished instantly. The tray nearly slipped from her hands. A man had just stepped inside. Tall, clean-cut, familiar. The sound around her seemed to disappear. The music became distant. Conversations faded into a blur. Jasmine could only stare. Her heart began pounding so hard it hurt. No, not here. Not tonight. The man greeted several guests and smiled politely as if he belonged there. As if he had every right to occupy the same space she did. Jasmine took a step backward. Then another. Her breathing became shallow. She quickly turned away before he could see her face. The tray shook slightly in her trembling hands. A nearby server noticed. "You okay?" Jasmine forced a nod. "Just tired." But she was not tired. She was terrified. She moved through the ballroom faster now, weaving between guests, keeping her eyes lowered. Every instinct screamed the same warning. Do not let him see you. Across the room, the man continued speaking with several attendees. He laughed at something someone said, completely relaxed, completely unaware that he had shattered the peace Jasmine had spent years trying to rebuild. She reached the far side of the ballroom and risked a quick glance over her shoulder. The moment she did, she saw him looking around the room, searching. Her stomach dropped. Maybe it was coincidence. Maybe not. She was not willing to find out. Jasmine quickly slipped through a cluster of guests near one of the banquet tables positioned along the wall. The table was enormous, draped with elegant white linen that nearly touched the floor. Without allowing herself time to think, she crouched down and disappeared beneath it. The cool marble pressed against her knees. The heavy tablecloth concealed her from view. Above her, she could hear muffled conversations and the occasional clink of crystal glasses. Her hands were shaking now. She wrapped her arms around herself and tried to steady her breathing. This was ridiculous. She knew it was ridiculous. A grown woman hiding under a table during a charity gala. Yet the fear felt real. The fear felt familiar. Outside her hiding place, the party continued exactly as before. Nobody noticed she was gone. Nobody noticed the frightened woman sitting beneath the expensive linen tablecloth. Nobody except fate. Because somewhere else in the ballroom, another pair of eyes had already begun to notice that one of his employees had suddenly vanished. And Vincent Moretti never ignored unusual things inside his own house. Jasmine pulled her knees closer to her chest beneath the table and tried to make herself smaller. The white linen hanging around her created a fragile barrier between her and the world above. Through tiny gaps in the fabric, she could see polished shoes moving across the marble floor. Guests continued laughing. Waiters carried trays of appetizers. Glasses clinked softly beneath the glow of crystal chandeliers. The party had not changed at all. Only Jasmine had. Her pulse refused to slow. Every time a pair of footsteps came too close, her stomach tightened. She hated this feeling. She hated what it did to her. For 3 years, she had worked hard to rebuild her life. She had found steady employment. She had created routines. She had learned how to smile again. Yet one unexpected face had managed to drag her back into a version of herself she thought no longer existed. Above her, a man's voice echoed briefly through the ballroom. Jasmine froze immediately. She could not hear every word. She did not need to. The sound alone was enough. Her fingers curled tightly against her sleeves. Memories tried forcing their way back into her mind. Long conversations that always ended with her apologizing for things she had not done. Endless criticism disguised as concern. The exhausting feeling of never being good enough no matter how hard she tried. None of it had involved physical danger. The wounds were quieter than that. Harder to explain. Harder to see. Yet somehow they lasted longer. Jasmine closed her eyes. She reminded herself of something her therapist had told her years ago. You are not there anymore. You are safe now. She repeated the words silently. Again and again. But safety felt difficult to believe when fear was sitting right beside her. Several feet away, A guest accidentally bumped the table. Jasmine nearly jumped. The silverware above rattled softly. She quickly covered her mouth to prevent any sound from escaping. The last thing she wanted was attention. Attention meant questions. Questions meant explanations. And she was not ready to explain anything. Across the ballroom, Vincent Moretti stood near a group of business leaders discussing a fundraising initiative. He listened politely while occasionally glancing around the room. Years of responsibility had sharpened his attention to detail. He noticed things other people ignored. Missing employees, nervous behavior, sudden changes. That was why something felt wrong tonight. One of the serving staff had vanished. Vincent casually excused himself from the conversation and began walking through the ballroom. His movements were unhurried, calm, observant. He passed clusters of guests and greeting tables before his attention settled on something unusual. A pair of black shoes partially visible beneath a long tablecloth. Vincent stopped. The shoes were not moving, not casually resting, hiding. He frowned slightly. The sight made no sense. A charity gala was many things. It was not a place where people hid under furniture. Nearby guests remained completely unaware. Vincent took another step closer. Under the table, Jasmine noticed the polished leather shoes approaching, different from everyone else's. More expensive, more deliberate. Her heart sank. Slowly, the unfamiliar shoes stopped directly in front of her hiding place. Silence followed. Then she saw a hand gently lift one corner of the white linen. Warm light flooded the small space beneath the table. Jasmine looked up instinctively, and for the first time that night, her eyes met Vincent Moretti's. Jasmine could not move. For a moment, all she saw was Vincent Moretti's face framed by the soft glow of the ballroom lights. His expression held no anger, no confusion, just quiet curiosity. The corner of the tablecloth remained lifted in one hand while guests continued laughing and talking only a few feet away, completely unaware of the strange scene unfolding beneath the banquet table. Jasmine immediately looked down, embarrassed. Heat rushed into her face. Of all the people who could have found her, it had to be him. "Miss Brooks." Vincent's voice was calm. "Are you all right?" Jasmine swallowed. The question should have been simple, yet she found herself unable to answer it. Was she all right? 5 minutes ago, she had believed she was. 5 minutes ago, she had been carrying drinks and smiling at guests. Now she was hiding beneath a table like a frightened child. Vincent studied her trembling hands. He noticed the tension in her shoulders, the way she avoided eye contact. Years of dealing with people had taught him how to recognize fear when he saw it. And this was fear, genuine fear, not embarrassment, not nervousness, something deeper. "Did someone hurt you?" he asked quietly. Jasmine shook her head immediately. "No." Her answer came too fast. Vincent noticed. She noticed that he noticed. Silence settled between them. The sounds of the gala seemed distant beneath the heavy tablecloth. Finally, Vincent lowered himself slightly so he would not tower over her. The simple gesture surprised Jasmine. Most powerful people expected others to rise to meet them. Vincent seemed willing to lower himself instead. "Then why are you hiding?" he asked. Jasmine looked toward the ballroom through a narrow opening in the linen. Guests moved through pools of golden light. Somewhere across the room, she caught a glimpse of the man she had been trying to avoid. He was speaking with another guest near the bar. The sight made her stomach tighten again. Vincent followed her gaze. His eyes narrowed slightly, not with suspicion, with understanding. "Are you hiding from someone?" The question landed directly on the truth. Jasmine felt tears threatening the corners of her eyes. She hated that. She hated feeling vulnerable, especially in front of someone like Vincent Moretti. Yet something about his voice made lying feel pointless. She looked away. Maybe. Vincent remained silent. He did not demand details. He did not pressure her. He simply waited. It was a patience Jasmine was not used to. Most people rushed to fill silence. Vincent seemed comfortable allowing it to exist. After several seconds, Jasmine finally spoke. "I saw someone I was not expecting." Vincent nodded once. "And seeing him made you hide under a table?" A tiny laugh escaped her before she could stop it. The situation sounded ridiculous when spoken aloud. "When you say it like that, it sounds crazy." A faint smile touched Vincent's face. "It sounds important." Jasmine blinked. Nobody had ever answered her that way before. Most people would have dismissed her fear, told her she was overreacting. Vincent didn't either. He simply treated it as real. Somewhere across the ballroom, a burst of laughter rose above the crowd. Vincent glanced toward the room and then back at Jasmine. Well, he said quietly, whoever he has managed to turn one of my most reliable employees into someone hiding under furniture. For the first time that night, Jasmine almost smiled, and for reasons she could not explain, the space beneath the table suddenly felt a little less lonely. Jasmine stared at the floor beneath the tablecloth and tried to find the right words. The problem was that there were too many words, too many memories, too many moments she wished had never happened. Yet none of them seemed easy to explain. Above them, the gala continued with effortless elegance. Waiters moved through the ballroom, carrying silver trays. Soft jazz drifted through hidden speakers. Guests laughed beneath the glow of chandeliers worth more than Jasmine earned in years. The contrast felt strange. The room looked beautiful, but inside her chest, everything felt unsettled. Vincent remained crouched beside the table, patient, calm, unhurried. He had every reason to return to his guests, every reason to dismiss this situation as a personal problem. Yet he stayed. Finally, Jasmine spoke. I used to know him. Vincent nodded slightly. The man near the bar? Jasmine looked surprised. You saw him? I saw who you were looking at. She lowered her eyes. Somehow that made the situation feel more real, more difficult to avoid. Vincent did not ask for details immediately. He simply waited. The silence gave Jasmine room to breathe, room to think. After a few moments, she whispered, "We dated a long time ago." The words felt heavier than they should have. Vincent's expression remained unchanged. Not judgmental, not curious in a gossiping way, just attentive. Jasmine looked through the opening in the tablecloth again. The man was still there, smiling, talking, looking perfectly comfortable. She wondered if he had any idea what his presence had done to her evening. Then she immediately hated herself for caring. He was not a bad person, she said quietly. At least, not in the way people usually mean. Vincent listened carefully. Then why are you hiding? Jasmine swallowed hard. Because that was the real question. Not who he was. Not what he had done. Why she was still afraid. Her fingers tightened together. Because when I was with him, I stopped recognizing myself. The words escaped before she could stop them. Vincent said nothing. Jasmine continued. Everything became about what I was doing wrong. How I dressed. How I talked. The goals I had. The friends I spent time with. Nothing was ever enough. Her voice remained soft, but the emotion underneath it was impossible to hide. Eventually, I started believing him. The ballroom seemed distant now. Just noise beyond the tablecloth. Jasmine stared at the marble floor. The worst part is that I spent years thinking he was right. For the first time, Vincent's expression shifted. Not with anger, with understanding. He had spent his life around powerful people. He knew that confidence could be built. He also knew it could be quietly taken apart one piece at a time. Jasmine laughed softly, though there was no humor in it. I know it sounds ridiculous. Seeing him should not matter anymore. Who told you that? Vincent asked. The question caught her off guard. Jasmine looked up. Vincent's eyes never left hers. Who told you healing follows a schedule? She blinked. What? You said it should not matter anymore. His voice remained steady. But sometimes old wounds surprise us. Jasmine felt something loosen inside her chest. Nobody had ever described it that way before. Most people expected her to be completely over it. Completely healed. Vincent seemed to understand that life was rarely that simple. Across the ballroom, another burst of laughter echoed through the room. Jasmine glanced toward the opening beneath the tablecloth, then back at Vincent. For the first time all evening, she realized she was no longer hiding from the man standing near the bar. She was hiding from the version of herself she feared becoming again. And somehow Vincent Moretti already seemed to know that. Jasmine sat quietly beneath the table for another moment, absorbing Vincent's words. Healing follows no schedule. The sentence lingered in her mind long after he said it. Somewhere inside her, a part she had spent years criticizing suddenly felt understood. The ballroom continued glowing beyond the white linen barrier. Music drifted through the air. Guests moved from conversation to conversation without realizing that beneath one of the tables, a woman was confronting pieces of her past she thought she had buried forever. Vincent remained beside her, showing no sign of impatience. It was a strange thing. Most people rushed to solve problems. Vincent seemed content simply helping someone carry one. Jasmine glanced toward the opening again. The man near the bar was laughing at something another guest had said. He looked exactly the same. The same confident posture. The same easy smile. Time had barely touched him. Yet looking at him now, Jasmine noticed something she had missed before. He no longer looked powerful. He only looked familiar. The realization surprised her. Vincent followed her gaze once more. Do you think he knows you are here? Jasmine considered the question. I do not know. Would you like him to? She immediately shook her head, then paused. The answer had come too quickly. Vincent noticed. That was interesting. Jasmine frowned slightly. What was? Your first answer and your second answer were different. She blinked. I only answered once. Vincent gave a small smile. No. First your fear answered. Then you thought about it. Jasmine looked away. The observation was annoyingly accurate. She had spent the evening acting on instinct. Hiding. Avoiding. Escaping. But now, sitting beneath the table beside someone who was not judging her, she found herself thinking differently. Vincent slowly stood and brushed an invisible speck of dust from his suit jacket. Then he extended a hand beneath the edge of the tablecloth. Not demanding, simply offering. Jasmine stared at it. What are you doing? Helping one of my employees out from under a table. Despite everything, she laughed softly. The sound surprised both of them. It was the first genuine laugh she had managed all evening. Vincent's expression warmed slightly. There it is. What? You. Jasmine looked at the offered hand again. Her heart still felt unsettled. The fear had not disappeared. The memories had not vanished. Derek was still somewhere in the ballroom. Nothing external had changed. Yet something inside her had begun shifting. Very slightly. Very quietly. Vincent seemed to sense it. You do not have to go back into the room if you are not ready, he said. But I do not think you belong under there anymore. Jasmine stared at the marble floor. Those words struck deeper than he probably realized. Because he was right. She did not belong under the table. She did not belong hiding from her own life. Slowly, she placed her hand in his. Vincent helped her to her feet. The ballroom suddenly looked different from above. Larger, brighter, less threatening. Jasmine adjusted her uniform and took a steadying breath. Guests continued mingling beneath the chandeliers. Nobody appeared to have noticed her disappearance. Vincent glanced toward a hallway leading away from the ballroom. Come with me. Jasmine looked at him. Where? Somewhere quieter. The invitation carried no pressure, only kindness. For the first time that evening, Jasmine followed someone not because she was running away from something, but because she might finally be walking towards safety. Vincent led Jasmine away from the ballroom and down a quiet corridor lined with dark walnut paneling and framed photographs from decades of family history. With every step, the noise of the gala faded behind them until only a distant murmur remained. Jasmine had walked these hallways countless times during work, yet tonight they felt completely different. Perhaps because she was no longer carrying a tray. Perhaps because for the first time she was not thinking about her responsibilities. She was thinking about herself. Vincent opened a heavy wooden door and motioned for her to enter. The library greeted them with warm amber light, towering bookshelves, and the soft crackle of a fireplace burning in the corner. Rain tapped gently against the tall windows overlooking the city. The room felt insulated from the rest of the world. Safe. Jasmine immediately noticed the silence. Not an empty silence. A comforting one. Vincent crossed the room and poured 2 glasses of water from a crystal pitcher resting on a side table. He handed one to her before taking a seat across from a leather sofa. Jasmine sat carefully, still unsure how she had gone from hiding beneath a banquet table to sitting in the private library of Vincent Moretti. For several moments neither spoke. The fire cast moving shadows across the room. Finally Vincent broke the silence. How long has it been since you saw him? Jasmine stared into her glass. Almost 3 years. Vincent nodded. And before tonight, I thought I would never see him again. Saying it aloud made her realize how much she had depended on that assumption. Distance had become part of her healing. The belief that the chapter was finished had helped her move forward. Vincent leaned back slightly. Life rarely asks our permission before reopening old chapters. Jasmine laughed softly. That sounds like something someone learns the hard way. A faint smile touched his face. Most useful lessons are. The room grew quiet again. Jasmine looked toward the fireplace. The dancing flames reminded her of evenings spent alone after ending the relationship, wondering whether she would ever feel confident again. She remembered questioning every decision, every dream, every opinion. It had taken years to rebuild what constant criticism had slowly eroded. Vincent seemed to sense where her thoughts had gone. Tell me something. Jasmine looked up. What? Who were you before you met him? The question caught her completely off guard. She opened her mouth, but no answer came. Vincent waited patiently. Jasmine searched her memory. Before Derek. Before doubt. Before constantly second-guessing herself. Slowly, pieces began returning. I used to be fearless. A small smile appeared. I wanted to start my own catering business someday. Vincent nodded. What else? Jasmine looked toward the rain-streaked window. I laughed more. Another smile. A lot more. Vincent studied her carefully. Interesting. What is? Everything you just described is still here. Jasmine blinked. You do not know that. Actually, I do. His voice remained calm. The woman who hid under a table tonight is not the whole story. Jasmine stared at him. The firelight reflected in his eyes. For the first time all evening, she felt something stronger than fear. Hope. Small. Fragile. But real. And somewhere deep inside, a version of herself she thought had disappeared forever was beginning to wake up. The fire continued burning softly as rain traced silver lines across the library windows. Jasmine sat quietly, replaying Vincent's words in her mind. Everything you just described is still here. No one had spoken to her that way before. Most people focused on what was broken. Vincent seemed interested in what had survived. The realization felt strangely powerful. She looked around the room. Shelves filled with books stretched toward the ceiling. Framed photographs lined the mantel above the fireplace. The entire space carried a sense of permanence, as though it had weathered every storm life could bring. For the first time since entering the ballroom that evening, Jasmine felt her breathing return to normal. Vincent stood and walked toward one of the windows overlooking the city. Chicago glowed beneath the rain. Thousands of lights scattered across the darkness. Do you know something interesting? He asked without turning around. Jasmine looked up. What? Vincent folded his hands behind his back. Most people believe confidence comes from never being afraid. Jasmine listened. It does not. He glanced back toward her. Confidence comes from moving forward despite being afraid. The words settled into the room. Jasmine stared at the fire. She thought about the woman she used to be. The young woman who dreamed of owning a business. The woman who walked into unfamiliar places without apologizing for taking up space. Somewhere along the way, she had begun measuring herself through someone else's opinions. Somewhere along the way, she had forgotten her own voice. Vincent returned to his chair. Tell me something honestly. Jasmine nodded. All right. If that man was not at the gala tonight, what would you be doing right now? The answer arrived immediately. Working. Vincent smiled slightly. No. Jasmine frowned. What do you mean? You answered with your job. He leaned forward. What would Jasmine be doing? The question caught her off guard again. For several seconds, she had no answer. Then she surprised herself. I would probably be laughing with the other staff members in the kitchen. A small smile appeared. Mrs. Ramirez always tells terrible jokes during events. Vincent nodded. There she is. Jasmine laughed softly. This time the sound came easier. More natural. The fear was still there, but it no longer filled the entire room inside her mind. Vincent watched her carefully. Nobody gets to decide your worth, Miss Brooks. Jasmine looked up. His voice remained calm, but the conviction behind it was unmistakable. Not a former boyfriend. Not a stranger. Not anyone. The room fell silent. Rain continued tapping against the glass. The fire crackled softly. Jasmine felt emotion rise unexpectedly in her chest. Not sadness. Something else. Relief. Because deep down she knew he was right. The problem was never that she lacked value. The problem was that she had spent years listening to someone who convinced her otherwise. Vincent stood and straightened his jacket. Then he glanced toward the library door leading back to the gala. The question is no longer whether you are safe. Jasmine followed his gaze. What is the question? Vincent opened the door. Warm light from the hallway spilled into the room. Then he looked back at her. The question is whether you are ready to stop hiding. Jasmine looked at the open doorway and felt her heartbeat quicken again. The ballroom was waiting on the other side. So was the man she had spent the entire evening avoiding. A few hours earlier, the thought would have sent her running in the opposite direction. Now it simply made her nervous. Somehow that felt like progress. Vincent did not pressure her. He stood beside the door and waited. The choice was entirely hers. Jasmine took a slow breath and rose from the sofa. The fire crackled softly behind her as she crossed the library. Each step felt symbolic. Small, but important. She was not walking toward a man from her past. She was walking toward her own life. Vincent opened the door wider and together they stepped into the hallway. The distant sounds of the gala gradually returned. Music, laughter, conversation, life continuing exactly as it had before. Yet Jasmine felt different now. The hallway seemed shorter than she remembered. The ballroom doors appeared ahead, glowing beneath warm golden light. When they reached the entrance, Jasmine stopped. Through the open doorway, she could see guests moving between tables. Crystal chandeliers reflected across polished marble floors. Everything looked exactly the same. The only thing that had changed was her. Vincent noticed her hesitation. "You do not have to prove anything to anyone in that room," he said quietly. Jasmine nodded. "I know." And for the first time, she truly meant it. She stepped inside. Nobody gasped. Nobody pointed. Nobody cared that she had briefly disappeared. The world had not stopped turning. The realization brought an unexpected sense of freedom. She moved through the crowd at a normal pace, greeting guests and staff members as she passed. Several co-workers smiled when they saw her return. One server jokingly asked if she had been kidnapped by paperwork. Jasmine laughed. An actual laugh. Easy and natural. The sound surprised even her. Then she saw him. Across the ballroom, near one of the display tables, stood Derek Collins. He was listening to another guest while holding a glass of sparkling water. For a brief moment, old instincts tried to return. Hide. Leave. Look away. Instead, Jasmine remained where she was. She simply observed. The strange thing was that Derek looked smaller than she remembered. Not physically, emotionally. For years he had occupied an enormous space in her mind. Tonight he looked like what he truly was. A person. Nothing more. Nothing less. As if sensing her gaze, Derek glanced across the room. Their eyes met. Jasmine felt her pulse quicken. Then something unexpected happened. Nothing. No collapse. No panic. No loss of control. She remained standing. Derek appeared surprised for a second before offering a polite nod. Jasmine returned the gesture. Calm. Respectful. Unafraid. Then she continued walking. She did not stop. She did not explain herself. She did not seek approval. She simply moved forward. Near the center of the ballroom, Jasmine paused beside a table of fresh flowers. Vincent stood several yards away speaking with guests. He did not rush over. He did not intervene. He did not need to. Their eyes met briefly across the room. A faint smile touched his face. Jasmine smiled back. In that moment, she realized something important. Strength was not the absence of fear. Strength was the decision that fear would no longer be in charge. And for the first time in years, Jasmine Brooks felt stronger than the memories that had once controlled her. The rest of the evening unfolded with a quiet kind of grace. Jasmine moved through the ballroom with a confidence she had not felt in years. She returned to helping guests, speaking with coworkers, and carrying out her responsibilities. But something fundamental had changed. The weight she had been carrying all night was no longer pressing against her chest. The fear that had driven her beneath a table now felt distant, like a storm moving farther toward the horizon. Around her, the gala continued beneath sparkling chandeliers and warm golden light. Guests celebrated successful fundraising efforts. Conversations flowed easily. Laughter echoed across the room. Yet for Jasmine, the most important victory of the night would never appear in a speech or a newspaper headline. It was happening quietly inside her. Near the end of the event, many guests began making their way toward the exits. Coats were collected. Final handshakes were exchanged. The crowd gradually thinned. Jasmine was arranging a display near the entrance when she noticed Derek preparing to leave. For a brief moment their eyes met once more. This time there was no panic. No urge to disappear. No desire to run. Derek offered a small, respectful nod. Jasmine returned it politely. Then he walked out the door and vanished into the rainy Chicago night. That was it. No dramatic confrontation. No grand speech. No final argument. Just a man leaving a room. And somehow that simple moment felt more powerful than anything she could have imagined. Because she finally understood the truth. Derek had not taken her confidence with him when the relationship ended. She had carried the fear herself for years. And tonight, she had finally set it down. Hours later, after the last guests departed and the ballroom had grown quiet, Jasmine stepped outside onto a covered terrace overlooking the city. The rain had stopped. The air smelled fresh and clean. Below, Chicago shimmered beneath countless lights stretching toward the horizon. She rested her hands on the stone railing and took a deep breath. For the first time all evening, She felt completely calm. A few moments later, Vincent joined her. Neither spoke immediately. They stood side by side looking out at the city. The silence felt comfortable, peaceful. Finally, Vincent glanced toward her. "How are you feeling?" Jasmine smiled softly. The answer came easier than she expected. "Like myself." Vincent nodded, as though that was exactly the answer he had hoped to hear. The city lights reflected in the distance while a cool breeze moved through the night. Jasmine thought about everything that had happened. The fear, the hiding, the conversation in the library, the moment she walked back into the ballroom. None of it had changed her overnight, but it had reminded her of something important. The person she had been searching for was never gone. She had simply forgotten where to look. Vincent adjusted his jacket and prepared to return inside. Before leaving, he paused. "Miss Brooks." Jasmine turned toward him. A faint smile touched his face. "Never let anyone convince you that your worth belongs to them." Then he walked back toward the mansion. Jasmine remained on the terrace for a while longer, watching the city glow beneath the night sky. The woman who had hidden under a table at the beginning of the evening felt very far away now. Not because someone rescued her, not because someone fought her battles, but because someone reminded her of her own strength. And that night, Jasmine Brooks stopped hiding from her past and finally stepped back into her future. And in the quiet after the storm, the world remembered what dignity looks like.